The noon sun hung lazily over the quiet suburban streets, spilling a sleepy kind of warmth onto sidewalks cracked by time. In the heart of this town, tucked between a laundromat and a hardware store, sat Sunnydale Diner, a place that, on the surface, buzzed with life. Inside, the clinking of cutlery, the murmur of casual conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter painted a picture of a place untouched by trouble. The vinyl booths were worn but clean. The counters gleamed under buzzing fluorescent lights, and the scent of bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. No one paid much attention when a new customer walked in. Scruffy hoodie, faded jeans, a beard, and thick glasses that didn't quite hide the sharpness in his eyes. Jacob Wells, the CEO of the Sunnydale Diner chain, wasn't here to enjoy a meal. He was here on a mission, to see if the heart of his company was still beating honestly. Not the reports, not the numbers, the truth. Sliding into a booth near the back, Jacob nursed a coffee and watched. The place was busy but not rushed, the kind of steady rhythm a seasoned manager should have mastered. Then he saw her, Megan, maybe mid-20s, though the exhaustion around her eyes made her seem older. She wore the crisp uniform, the polite smile, all the right notes for a company marketing itself as one big family. But something was wrong. It was in the way her shoulders flinched at every barked order from the kitchen. The way her smile flickered, there, gone, there again, as if powered by pure will. The way she apologized to customers for mistakes she didn't seem to have made. Jacob took another sip of coffee, the bitterness spreading across his tongue. He knew every slogan on the diner's walls. He knew the training manuals by heart. He knew what the commercials promised: family, warmth, community. What he didn't know, not yet, was how far those promises had drifted from reality. As Megan rushed to clear a table, a middle-aged man in a manager's uniform snapped at her, loud enough for half the diner to hear. No apology, no awareness. Just casual, crushing condescension. Jacob set his cup down, heart thudding in his chest. This wasn't an outlier. This was the culture growing like mold under the glossy surface he'd trusted, and what he was about to uncover over the next few hours would not just challenge his faith in his business, it would change the entire course of his life. The aroma of sizzling oil and scorched bacon hung thick in the air, laced with a sharp undercurrent of stress. From his booth near the back of the diner, Jacob stirred his black coffee slowly, eyes calm but alert. The place had charm, at least from the outside. Classic red stools, checkered floors, an old jukebox humming low in the corner. But behind the gleam, he saw it. A current of something darker. Customers shifted impatiently in their seats. A toddler banged his plastic spoon against a table as his mother muttered about the wait. An elderly couple tried to flag someone down for water. The grumbles weren't loud, but they were steady, like a pot on the verge of boiling. Megan darted between tables with the urgency of someone trying to hold a collapsing dam with her bare hands. Her hair, tied back in a loose ponytail, was damp at the roots. A smile clung to her lips, but her eyes flickered, calculating, scanning, apologizing before anyone even spoke. "Sorry for the wait, sir," she said softly as she refilled Jacob's coffee. Her voice was frayed around the edges, like fabric worn too thin. He looked up, nodded. "No problem," he said. "You handling all this alone?" She hesitated. "It's just me and Connor today. Kitchen's behind. I'll be right back with your toast." She moved fast, disappearing through the swinging doors into the kitchen. Then came the bark. "Move faster, Megan. Orders are piling up." The voice. Rick just cut through the restaurant like a blade. Jacob recognized the type. Loud in public, small in spirit. He leaned slightly to one side. Through the narrow slit in the kitchen doors, he saw Rick, apron stained, arms crossed, face flushed with irritation. And next to him, Megan, shoulders tight, silent, nodding. The next 10 minutes passed with mounting tension. Rick's voice continued, sometimes directed at Megan, sometimes at Connor, the lone teenage cook who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dishes clattered. Megan dropped a glass. Rick swore. Connor apologized for a forgotten order. Rick swore again. Then silence, followed by something softer, a sound barely audible over the clink of forks and hiss of the griddle. Crying. Jacob stood. He walked slowly toward the kitchen, passing by tables of customers who barely looked up. He paused at the door, listening. "I'm trying, Rick. I haven't had a break in 6 hours. You think this is hard?" Rick's voice was like gravel. "Try managing this place. Crying doesn't cook food, sweetheart. Get it. Together." Jacob pushed through the door. Rick turned, startled. "You can't be back here. Customers aren't allowed." "Relax," Jacob said calmly. His eyes met Megan's, red-rimmed, ashamed. "She okay?" Rick scoffed. "She's fine, just overwhelmed. It's lunch rush." Jacob stepped further, and taking in the grease-streaked walls, the sink stacked with dishes, the single flickering overhead light. Connor stood by the grill, eyes down, pretending not to listen. "She needs a break," Jacob said, voice steady. "You've got 1 server, 1 cook, and 30 people out there. You're running this place into the ground." Rick laughed. Not kindly. "You think you know better than me? I've run this diner for 8 years. That girl's lucky to have a job." Megan flinched, eyes darting between them. Jacob didn't raise his voice. "What she is exhausted, and you're lucky she's stayed." Rick stepped forward, voice lowering into a warning growl. "You don't tell me how to run my staff, buddy." "Wasn't a suggestion," Jacob said, eyes still calm. "Just an observation, one of many." He turned to Megan. "Go get some air, take 10 minutes. Megan hesitated, glanced at Rick. Rick opened his mouth. "Go," Jacob said again, this time with a soft firmness that bypassed permission. Megan walked out, fast, as if she might be stopped if she moved slower. The door swung shut behind her. Rick turned back. "What are you, her boyfriend?" "No," Jacob said, pulling out his phone. "Just someone who believes people deserve better than this." He tapped something into a notes app. Rick narrowed his eyes. "What are you writing?" "Does it matter?" Rick stepped forward again. "Look, man, we're just under pressure. Staff quit last week. Megan's just sensitive." "She's human," Jacob said. Connor dropped a spatula. No one noticed. Rick forced a laugh. "Look, this isn't your concern. Why don't you go back to your eggs?" "I will," Jacob said, "but I'll be back." With that, he turned and walked out of the kitchen. The clamor of the diner rushed back around him. Conversations, clinking cups, the occasional burst of laughter. Megan sat outside the front window on a bench, head tilted toward the sun. Her eyes were closed, lips pressed tight. Jacob slid into his booth again, sipped his coffee, pulled out a pen and a small notepad from his jacket. He began to write, not just what he saw, but what he felt, the culture, the neglect. The abuse that had become so common it went unnoticed by everyone else. They had no idea who he really was. But by the time they found out, it would be too late to fake a smile. He'd come to observe a struggling restaurant. Now he knew. This wasn't about food. It was about people, and what we choose to do when no one's looking. The jet hummed gently at cruising altitude, a blanket of clouds stretching endlessly outside the oval windows. Inside, however, turbulence had already begun, not from the sky, but in the mind of Victor Langston. He sat stiffly in his seat, legs crossed, Rolex peeking subtly from beneath his cuff. The man beside him, Keanu, as he'd introduced himself simply, had asked for nothing but water, and had spent most of the flight quietly reading a dog-eared copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Victor, who had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal over shrimp cocktails and ego-fueled handshakes, felt something sting his pride. He tried again, voice dipped in condescension. "You know, it's rare they let coach passengers upgrade to first." He smiled thinly. "Must have been your lucky day, huh?" Keanu looked up slowly. His face held no offense, just an earnest gaze, clear and unmoved. "Maybe. Or maybe not. Everything good in life has to be earned by pushing others down." Victor chuckled, too loud. "Right. Well, I guess we all define earning differently." But the laugh didn't land. A woman across the aisle glanced over briefly. "Keanu, Didn't flinch, didn't rise to defend. He simply sipped his water again, the same half-full plastic cup he'd held for over an hour, as though the stillness of it meant more than the champagne Victor had drained twice already. Victor couldn't help it. He leaned back with, "Scoff. You know, I've worked my ass off for this seat. Years of 4 a.m. meetings, clients yelling in my ear, missing holidays. You can't just sit here and talk about humility from a perch you didn't build." Keanu tilted his head, almost kindly. "Then maybe it's not the seat you earned, but the noise." The words hit like a whisper in a cathedral. Victor blinked. Keanu turned back to his book. For the next 10 minutes, silence filled their row, except it wasn't quiet. It was charged. Victor could hear his own thoughts now, louder than ever. And something in them felt off, like a song he'd always sung now sounded out of tune. Finally, he broke again. "So what do you do, Keanu? Or do you just float through life, being profound and poor?" A nearby businessman shifted uncomfortably. Keanu didn't react with anger. He gently closed his book and placed it on the tray. His voice came low, even. "I act." Victor narrowed his eyes. "Act?" Keanu nodded. "In movies. But I try not to act when I'm off camera." Victor paused, the words slipping past him. "Any film I'd know?" Keanu smiled, just barely. "Maybe." Victor snorted, leaning back, clearly unimpressed. "Figures." There was a crack forming, though. Not in Keanu. In Victor. It was the kind of slow, creeping fracture that doesn't show until you're already hollow inside. He looked again at the man beside him. His worn-out jeans, the faded shirt, no watch, no laptop, not even a phone in his hand. And yet, he sat like a mountain, unmoved, grounded, while Victor, with all his polish and profit, felt unmoored. "Why the hell are you so calm?" Victor blurted. Keanu didn't answer immediately. He looked out the window. "Because storms don't scare me when I know who I am." Victor scoffed again, but softer this time. Not for show. Because the words scraped something raw. Keanu continued, still gazing at the clouds. "Some people chase noise to drown the silence inside them. I used to too, but I realized, if I don't make peace with the quiet, I'll never hear what really matters." Victor swallowed. Something small, barely noticeable, shifted in his chest. "You think you've got it all figured out?" he said, but the edge had dulled. "No," Keanu replied, "but I've figured out what not to chase." For a long moment, neither spoke. And then the final cut came. Not sharp, but soft, the kind that lingers. Victor glanced at his empty champagne glass, then at Keanu's cup of water, still untouched since his last sip. "How do you do it?" he asked, voice quieter than before. "How do you sit in silence and not need more?" Keanu turned toward him now, met his gaze. "Because sometimes, stillness is where we finally hear the truth." Victor looked away, but not before Keanu saw it, the flicker. The first flicker of doubt in a man who'd thought he had it all. From a few rows behind, someone whispered, "Is that?" But Keanu had already returned to his book, as if the world weren't unraveling around the man next to him. Victor didn't sleep for the rest of the flight. He just sat there, quiet for once, staring down at his reflection in the black screen of his phone. And for the first time in a long, long while, he didn't like what he saw. The hum of the jet engines had long faded into white noise, but tension still buzzed like static between seats 2A and 2B. Victor had reached the point of no return, emotionally frayed and irrationally agitated. For the past hour, he'd tried to provoke Keanu with everything short of outright insult. "How's the water?" Victor smirked, swirling his third glass of Dom Perignon. "You sure you're in the right cabin? They do serve juice back in economy." Keanu took a sip, calm as ever. "Hydration's underrated, especially in the air." Victor scoffed. "You know what's underrated? Knowing your place. This seat costs more than some people make in a month. Guess you just got lucky?" A pause. Then Keanu tilted his head slightly, as if weighing whether the question deserved an answer. "Maybe," he said at last. "Or maybe we all end up in the right place when we stop trying to prove we belong." The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. Their softness was their blade. Victor blinked. He didn't know why, but the comment unsettled him. The air between them shifted, and others felt it too. A woman across the aisle looked up from her book. A businessman paused his typing. The flight attendant passing through slowed, sensing something intangible but real. Victor leaned forward, voice rising. "You know what I think? I think guys like you sit up here once and think they're philosophers. But me? I earned this seat. I built an empire. What have you done? Meditate and hand out bottled water." Keanu looked at him fully for the first time, not with anger or even pity. Just stillness. And for Victor, that was worse. "You built an empire," Keanu repeated quietly. "That's impressive." Victor felt a brief, empty surge of pride. Keanu continued, "But tell me, does that empire serve people or does it serve you?" That landed like a punch, because Victor didn't know anymore. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. For a man so used to talking, he suddenly had no words. The silence lingered. Then Victor broke it. Too loud, too sharp, too insecure to be ignored. "You don't know a damn thing about me. You..." A shadow passed over them. The flight attendant. Her tone was light, professional, but the shift she triggered would change the entire cabin. "Mr. Reeves," she said gently, bending toward Keanu. "Just checking in. Is there anything else I can get you?" The name hit like a dropped glass. A pause. Then murmurs. Then silence. Again. Victor went pale. He turned slowly as the realization dawned. The black shirt, the long fingers, the quiet poise. The humility he'd mocked wasn't performance. It was Keanu Reeves. The whispers rippled through the cabin. One man whispered to his wife. A teen across the aisle subtly pulled out her phone, hand trembling. Victor froze. He wanted to disappear, or rewind, or anything other than sit next to a man he'd just spent 2 hours mocking for being less than. And now, in front of a dozen first-class witnesses, he was the fool. Keanu didn't gloat, didn't shift, didn't even smirk. He simply turned to Victor, voice steady. "Respect," he said, "isn't about who someone is, it's about who you are. No anger, no bitterness, just truth, laid bare." Victor slumped back in his seat, eyes cast down. All the status in the world couldn't save him from the mirror that had just been held up to his soul. Keanu leaned back, put on his headphones, and closed his eyes. The moment was over for him, but it had only just begun for Victor. A man who had everything, yet now realized how little of it mattered. And for the rest of the flight, no one spoke to Keanu, but no one looked away either. Because sometimes, the quietest man in the room says the loudest thing of all. The last plate was cleared. The late lunch rush had passed, and sunlight streaked across the checkered floors of the diner. Floors that hadn't seen this many footsteps in weeks. Megan stood at the counter, eyes trailing Jacob as he wiped. Down the tables himself, apron still tied unevenly around his waist. "You know," she said softly, "for the first time in a long time, this place feels like it matters again." Jacob looked up. Not with the old defensiveness, not with the practiced CEO smile, just a quiet nod. "That's because you do," he replied. In the days since his undercover revelation, things had shifted, subtly at first, then like a tide finally pulling free of the dam. Staff began arriving early, not out of fear but with purpose. Maria, once on the verge of quitting, had started organizing weekend specials. Darnell, the dishwasher who used to mutter under his breath, now sang while scrubbing. And Megan? She had become the anchor and the compass. The regulars returned. Then, a few new faces. Then something unexpected. Laughter. It wasn't the business metrics that changed first. It was the atmosphere, the air of a place that had remembered its soul. But the real transformation. That happened in Jacob. He no longer watched from the sidelines. He showed up, not with memos, but with presence. He didn't just ask about margins. He asked about people. When Darnell's mom got sick, Jacob covered his shift. No announcement, no need for applause. He realized leadership wasn't about issuing rules or pushing results. It was about the tone you set when no one's watching. It was about the small, invisible choices. How you greet your team. How you clean a mess that's not yours. How you apologize when you're wrong. Because respect, he now knew, isn't built by rules. It's built by how you show up. On a quiet night long after the last customer left, Jacob sat at the counter where this journey had truly begun. Megan refilled his coffee, same as she always had. But this time, they didn't feel like boss and employee. They felt like something closer to partners. He looked around, not at a restaurant, not at a balance sheet, but at a living place filled with human hands, human stories, and second chances. He had failed before. He would fail again. But this time, he'd be present through it, and this time, he'd lead from where it mattered, the heart. But Jacob's journey of redemption was just beginning. Tomorrow's story begins with a letter. A quiet envelope left on his desk from a former employee he thought he'd long forgotten. What it says will unravel everything and force him to finally confront the hidden cost of the policies he once believed in. Stay tuned, because some stories don't end, they evolve.